So your blocks are made, quilted, trimmed to the desired size, and it's time to turn it into this. Turn the other side. So, let's get started on it. I'll be right back. Okay, so all your blocks are created, quilted, and trimmed to your desired size. That's the back. Here's the front. Alright, so they are all now created, quilted, and trimmed to the desired size. So now we're going to start connecting them together. Now first off, I'm going to just say, whatever fabric you wind up using for your connectors strips, please make sure that it's ironed very, very well and starched well. Trust me, you'll thank me for that afterwards. Trust me, I know. So we're going when you after you get your fabrics ironed and starched well, you are going to need to cut 1-inch strips and 1 3/4 inch strips, or you could do it 1.5 inch. If you're really good at sewing a true 1/4 inch seam. Because of my poor eyesight, my 1/4 inch seam sometimes is a little bit off. Yes, I admit it. So I tend to cut my strips at 1 3/4 instead of 1.5, and you'll understand why here in a minute. So I have a 1-inch strip cut here, and then I have a 1 3/4 inch strip that I've actually, it's starched, doesn't look like it, but it is, and then you're going to fold it in half. Let me see if I can get this separate. I pressed it so well it doesn't want to split. Alright, so you got a 1 3/4 inch strip, then you're going to press it well in half, so you get this. Alright, and then you're going to get your block that you want to start connecting. Now, also I suggest that you have your blocks laid out in whatever pattern that you desire. Alright, let me get some of this out of my way. Now, something to bear in mind, whatever side that you decide to add your strips to, make sure you do that to all of your blocks, except for the very outside block, your last one in your row or your column. I prefer to do mine in rows because it's just a little easier for me when it comes time to stitch things. So I got a big old glue stick here. Unfortunately, one of my dogs decided to steal my Soline glue pen, and they either hid it someplace or they chewed it. I have yet to find it. I was using it one day and I walked outside to do something in the yard, came back in, and it was gone. So I'm pretty sure that one of the dogs decided to abscond with it. Alright, so I'm going to tilt the camera down so you can see exactly what I'm doing here. Lined up a little bit. I'm going to now I do it with the 1-inch strip on the top. I'm just going to make sure that it lines up. Okay, good. And have a little extra. Say if your block is 12 inches, make your strips, cut your strips to like 14 inches. Now I'm just going to take a little bit of my glue stick and run it at the very edge of the block. It's a lot quicker and easier with my Soline glue pen, but since it's gone, I have to resort to using this big old bulky glue stick. And it's a little inconvenient because it makes a thicker line than what I truly want. But never fear, I ordered a new Soline glue pen, and it should be here sometime next week. Alright, so I have nice coating of glue along this edge. Now, you want to try to go as close to the edge as possible. Alright, so that's done. I'm going to now take my 1-inch strip, and I'm going to lay it on the very edge, wrong side down. Or I should say right side down. Pardon me. Okay, just make sure that it's all lined up nice and even. Give it a good, you could actually set this with an iron if you want. I tend not to do that because while I'm sewing, things could shift just a little bit and I may have to pull this up to realign things. You could also pin it, but I have found that pinning tends to distort the strips, and after all, these are just 1-inch strips here. Now, what did I do with my my scissors or my there it is, it's hidden, my rotary cutter. Now I'm going to cut off this little bit of extra that's right here. I don't need that much extra. Okay, so now you can see this is nicely attached. It's straight across. I'm just going to make sure that it's well adhered. Then I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to take one of the strips, the 1 3/4 inch strips that I've already folded in half, and I'm using a brighter color so that you can kind of sort of see what I've got here. And then I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to take my glue stick and I'm going to run a line of glue right at the edge. Try not to go anything past 1/4 inch. With the Soline glue pen, it makes it so much easier because it's got such a finer point. And just make sure you get a nice covering of your glue stick or however you attach it. I have tried pinning it, and I have no success with pinning. Alright, so then I'm going to take this strip and I'm going to line it up with the raw edges outside, or to the outer edge. Now don't stretch it, just hold it taut and just kind of press it into place, and so it will stick nicely. Alright, at this point, before you sew anything, double check that you have it, this is the way it's supposed to be, that you have it on the correct side. You don't want, if this is your first block in your row, you don't need to put one here. You need to put it on the right side, or vice versa if you're starting from the right and going to the left. I'm left-handed, so I always start and go towards the right. Alright, so I just flip that. So once that's done, now I already have one here that's already made up with some threads attached to it. It's sewed into place with the 1/4 inch seam. I got bunches of threads here. Alright, so it's quarter, or you sewed this together, both strips together along with your block. So it's going to look like this. Then you're going to take this to your ironing board or your however you iron, and you're going to iron only the top strip open. And you're going to see this is where having well starched fabric is going to come in handy, because these 1-inch strips, they get a little flimsy and they can distort, and by having well starched fabric, it tends not to do that. And then also when you go to press this one back, it'll help keep it the way you want it. Alright, I'm going to get this one that I was working on out of the way, and I'm going to grab another one. Now remember, this one I already made up, so it's ready to go. So then I'm going to take my next block in the row, and I'm going to flip it over. I want to double check that everything is the correct size, because it is easy to mess up and cut something a little bit bigger. And yes, they match up. Okay, so then I'm going to flip this over and around, and I'm going to add a very light coating of glue to this edge. Now again, you could pin, but I find that the pins just get in the way when you're trying to sew, and it tends to distort those little thin strips of fabric. So just get a nice even, well, you don't even have to have it even, you could just start it at one end and line up things and then bring it to your machine, just making sure that you keep things lined up. Alright, so I'm going to flip this back over. I'm going to double check that my pattern is going the way I want it to go, and then I'm going to line it up at the bottom first, and then line it up along that 1-inch strip that you, on the top of your block, that you pressed to the outside, and then just press into place. Got all kinds of loose threads here. Now before I would sew this, I would just kind of let this glue set a little bit on its own. Then I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to double check that everything is lined up here the way I want it. This is a little off. And the good thing about the glue is you can lightly pull it and replace it. Now if you heat set that, you're going to have a little bit more of a difficult time doing that. Alright, so I am going to go to the machine. I'm not going to show you how I do this. I'm just going to sew a 1/4-inch seam using my 1/4-inch foot, and I'll tell you the reason why. Because your 1/4-inch foot will fit nicely underneath this little flap that's here, and at least mine does. I'm sure that most a 1/4-inch foot is pretty much the same, or universal for most all machines. And I'm going to sew it with this flap side up. Alright, I will be right back, and I will show you what the next part of this will be. Okay, so it's sewn. As you can see, I just ran a 1/4-inch seam right along here, and it's secured so that I can open this back up, and at this point you'll see that this should fit together just about perfectly here. I would rather err on the side of it being a little open than being too bunched up, and then you'll get a bunching here in your little valley right here. So I would much rather err on the side of it being a little bit less, you know, maybe a less than a 1/4 inch, maybe a scant 1/4 inch. Now also I would take this to my pressing area and I would set the seam. And now it's also really important that you pull this back just in case that you got a little bit of glue outside of your 1/4 inch mark. Alright, now let's pretend that I took this to my pressing area, and you'll press it so it looks like this. Gosh, I hope you can see what I'm doing here, because the weather is rather gloomy here today and I'm not getting a whole bunch of extra light in. So after you have that pressed, let's pretend that I did press it. I'll finger press it. It's better if you press it with a hot iron. And after it's pressed, then you can take your glue stick and liberally spread a line of glue along the flap, the inside portion, and then I take it and run it right along this little valley here. Alright, and then you can take and fold it over and press it well. So you actually do want to try to set that glue, if possible, in this particular stage. Alright, then you could either top stitch along this, it's not really the raw edge, it's the folded edge. You could top stitch that all the way down. I prefer not to top stitch. I like to hand tack it, because when you top stitch, you're actually going to see a line of stitches here, and I don't like that. I tend to I'll hand tack it, and it's basically just the same as tacking down a binding on your quilt. And it also, by hand binding it a little bit, while I'm hand binding it, if I see a little error, you know, like not a stitching error per se, but if my seam allowance wasn't quite right, I could kind of finagle that a little bit to make it look better while I'm hand tacking it. So that's that. And after that's done, now where is it? This strip is already done and hand tacked. You know, I hand tacked it. You can see right here. Now I elected to make this entire quilt scrappy. So I'm using a different color strip in each area. Now getting back to what I was saying before, this would be, let me get this over here a little bit. This would be block 1 of row 1, block 2 of row 1, block 3 of row 1, and then you get to block 4. You do not have to put a strip here unless you're going to add another block, obviously. So that's that, and like I said, each one of these is different. I'm making this as scrappy as I can. I'm trying to use up as many of these strips that I cut over the last, year and a half. So you can see that and I've elected to keep all of my angles going in one direction. You can see right in here. You could flip it around and do it the other way. Well, it's still going to come out the same by flipping it, but you could also make a little, like an XO pattern. Let's see if I can move this around so you can see what I'm talking about. This would be the X, as you can see here. Oh, that's not right either. This would have to be Oh, and I don't have the extra block here handy at the moment, or an extra block. But this one would have to be turned, so the angles would be going this way. But Quilt As You Go is a lot of fun, actually, and it's so much easier than trying to put together a whole big quilt and then trying to get it under your home machine, unless you have like a long arm or a machine with a super wide bed. So I'm going to go and I will tack this down, and then I'm going to add another block to it. I'm going to use, like, we'll set up one more here. Just double checking to make sure that all my squaring up and my blocks are true to the size that I want. Okay, and that the pattern is working out the way I want. And then I'm just going to take my glue stick or my Soline glue pen, and I'm just going to add a very fine, narrow line of glue to this side of the block. And then I'm going to get a strip here. I'm going to use this pretty, well, this isn't pretty, but I'm going to use this because I can. And then I'm going to lay it down, and remember, don't stretch it, just hold it taut and lay it across, and then give it a good press, or a good finger press, just so it makes a good contact with that glue. And then you can flip it over, and then I happen to have another strip here. This is the 2 1/3 inch strip that I've folded in half and pressed well, and then I'm going to lay it there, and just I want to make sure that the strip is long enough, which they should be, and I'm just going to apply a thin line of glue here to hold it in place. Again, you could pin, or you could use clips if you so desire. I prefer to use a little bit of glue. And again, just lay this on the edge with your raw sides out. Give it a good pressing. Sometimes what I'll do is, if I can find it, I'll take my ruler and I'll just lay it on there and just kind of press it down, because this way it's giving it a little bit more even spread of weight. And then after that sits for just a few minutes, I can take this to the machine and stitch a 1/4 inch seam right along here. Alright, I will be right back. Alright, that is sewn with my 1/4 inch seam. And now I'm going to bring this over, and ideally you should press this with a hot iron. It'll keep it much better. But unfortunately I don't have my ironing board handy at the moment. And again, pull just in case that if you did use the glue, that you didn't actually get stuck a little bit further in from your 1/4 inch seam. Again, only flip over the top. Leave the bottom one as it is. You don't need to do anything with it right now. Just leave it as it is. Alright, bring your next block that you want to attach to it over. Make sure that the orientation is the way you want it. Alright, it's the way I want it. And now I am going to just flip it around here, and I am going to again just add a little thin line of glue here Again, you don't want to go more than 1/4 of an inch if you can possibly help it. If you do, it's not a big deal, but try not to. That's why the sew line glue pen works great, because it's got such a fine point on it, where this glue stick is rather bulky. You could also use Elmer's liquid school glue, but then you definitely have to heat set that, where with this glue stick or the sew line glue pen, you don't have to set it. Double check, yep. Okay, line up your bottom, and then line up the sides along with that 1-inch strip that you sewn in place, and then folded back and pressed. I'm thinking that you're getting the idea here. It's really easy. And I'm going to just put my ruler here and press down a little bit, since I don't have my iron available to me at the moment, and I wasn't going to set it up just to iron a few blocks, because it's already too hot, and having the iron on in the little man cave here just adds extra heat that I don't really need. So I'm going to take this to the machine, but I'm going to actually flip it over so that when I sew, I'm sewing with the flap, the 1 3/4 inch folded flap on the top. Just if it's not lining up perfectly, just kind of nudge it over. You can, as long as you don't heat set this with your iron, you can kind of nudge things along a little bit with your fingernail. Alright, so I think that's good. I am going to take this to the machine and sew it, and I'll be right back. Alrighty, so that is now sewn. I can flip this over, and again, you would just want to make sure that these pretty much butt up right next to each other. And you want to pull your flap over and make sure that you give it a little bit of a tug to release any glue if you used it. Like I had a little overage there, so that I had to pull it. Alright, and I'll finger press this since I do not have my iron set up. Again, forgive me for not having my iron up. It's just too stinking hot to have any extra heat going on in the man cave here. Alright, so then after I'm going to just do that one more time with a little bit of fingernail action here. And then glue, a little bit of glue here. Again, you could pin if you want. This is not something that you could really use clips on this portion. You really either glue or pinning. Alright, just kind of push these together a little bit so they bunch up, and bring your flap over and give it a good press with your iron if you have it. It does make things a little bit easier with the iron. After I finish getting this together, I'll get my iron out and press it. The loose thread here. And now you could also put a ruler and a little bit of weight on that to hold it in place. Now after you're confident that it is held in place with your glue, you can either top stitch this, but remember, if you top stitch it, you are going to have a line of stitches. It's going to show up here, and I prefer not to have that. Honestly, I prefer to hand tack it down. Hand sewing for me gives me a chance to just sit back, relax, and actually either listen to some music on the radio or the stereo, or listen to some podcasts. Alright, so we have 2 of these done. Then, after you have them pressed, you're going to trim these. Now the reason why I suggest making it a little bit longer is it gives you a little bit of a head start with your stitching, so you don't get bird's nests. It acts kind of like a leader and an ender. So okay, after that is, these are tacked down, you're going to take your ruler, you're going to line things up here. Hope if you measured properly, everything should line up just about perfectly. And then just take your rotary cutter and just slice this extra bit off here. Same thing on the other side. Got a little carried away there. Alright, and then I'm going to move it and do this next section here. Make sure you have nothing under there that you don't want to cut. Aligning both sides here of your blocks that you just connected together, and trim off that extra bit. That one, this block, these 2 blocks are lined up just about perfectly. Alright, so I have one more that I'm going to attach, but I'm going to do that off camera. I've got this one here. Now, you're going to see that because this is the one that I started as a demonstration, you're going to see that I'm going to have to add it to this side. You really would like to keep your seams the way you tack them down in the same direction. So because I don't want to add it to this side, because you see I already have this here, and you don't need it. You don't need the strips on this side, because that's the side you're actually going to put your binding on. So because I made this little bit of an error, well, actually a little bit of an oversight, more or less, because I was trying to show or demonstrate how I do set up this the strips, the connecting strips. So I guess you get the idea now. What I would do at this one is just flip this over, align everything up, glue, sew, and repeat the trimming process, and then I would just hand stitch it. So as you can see, these are already, this row is stitched, hand stitched by hand. And again, as I was saying earlier, I'm making this entirely scrappy, so all of my strips are going to be different. Now if you were doing like a coordinated maybe a jelly roll or strips that you cut from a coordinated fat quarter bundle, you may want to use like all the same color connecting strips. Also, I also suggest that your connecting strips match your background fabric, because then you really won't see where they're connected. Like if I was to use the background fabric for this stripping here, it would be exactly the same, so you wouldn't see it. But I decided I'm going to make this entirely scrappy. Alright, so you're asking, well, how do you connect the rows together? The same way that you connect each of the blocks. Other than you just need longer strips. You know, let's say this is the top. You don't need one on the top. You just need it on the bottom, and then the bottom of the next row, and the bottom of the next row after that. You don't need to put one at the very, very bottom of your last block, or your last row. Alright, I hope that made some sense to you. When you see this next, it will be finished. Well, folks, I hope that answered any questions that you may have about how I connect my Quilt As You Go blocks. If you have any additional questions or concerns, you can leave them in the comments below, or my email address is also in the description box, and you can email directly to me and I'll try to get back to you just as quickly as possible. So right now I'm just hand tacking down the backs of these connector strips. Super easy to do, a little time consuming, but I like the end product much better than if I was to machine stitch it. So y'all have yourself just the best day ever. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay blessed, stay creative, and I will see you again very, very soon with a completed quilt. It'll be a little while because it's going to take me some time to finish, but when you see this again, it will be completed. Alright, just have the best day ever, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye for now.